it's Sid Cordle again from the Christian People's Alliance. Busy time, Sid, coming up to the local elections. You've got a lot of paperwork to do at the moment.
Yes, well, it's this time of year when you have to get the nominations in and you go around and see people, get people to stand as candidates, and that process finishes on the 9th of April. So we got just over 2 weeks now to get the job completed. Once the nominations are in, then it's the campaign is underway, and that's relatively enjoyable, especially the end of the campaign when you're just knocking on doors, and it's quite enjoyable doing that part of the campaign.
You should have been a Jehovah's Witness, Sid, not.
I'm glad that I'm standing for something which is true and honourable and just. If I was going around knocking on doors for the Jehovah's Witnesses, my message would be complete nonsense.
Well, listen, a lot of people would not enjoy the doorstep job. Some people do, because it gives you a chance to meet the boots on the ground.
Yes, the actual campaigning and knocking on doors is actually I find very enjoyable because yeah, like you say, you're meeting people and standing for the Christian People's Alliance. It's actually very easy to say to people, are you a Christian? And engage in conversation with people.
Keep into that side of politics a little bit. We've got the war going on, although we've got a 5-day window at the moment. You've got Trump on the one hand who wants to kill all the weapons off. We'd all agree with that. You've got Netanyahu with a different approach. He wants to eliminate the regime. Can't say I blame him when the regime says that they won't kill every Jew on sight. Is that a fair description of the two people?
Yes, it is, but exactly what's going on is not totally clear because the media aren't giving us the full picture. I mean, for instance, I've been reading this morning that there's some Iranian army units which have had defections above 90%, and that they've actually been shooting enormous number of their own soldiers for disobeying orders. So that's not a message you get in the media at all. I mean, the message in the media is, oh, the whole Iranian project is proving a disaster. It's proving terrible for Trump, and he should never have started it off. I mean, that's the message you're getting in the media. But if that message is true, that there are a large number of army units defecting, and they reckon that within a few weeks they're going to actually be able to overthrow the regime because it will be sufficiently weakened for people to go out in the streets and just overturn the regime. There won't be enough police officers and army officers to stop them. If that's correct, then we're actually on a very good path. We really hope and pray that that is correct, and this regime will soon be finished.
Yeah, but that's the real nub, isn't it? It's all right winning the war and throwing bullets, but it's what happens afterwards. And we've got salutary stories about that in the last century and this century. There doesn't seem to be enough of them to face down what they have to face. I'm not blaming them because they are utterly ruthless, these people.
It's
And
it's hard to know, frankly, because the regime themselves have imposed an internet blackout. They're not allowing a lot of journalists into Iran, or so it's hard to get a totally truthful picture of exactly what's going on. And because I think the regime don't want the world to know that they're still killing demonstrators and they're killing their own soldiers for disobeying orders. They don't want the world to know that. So they're trying to keep what they're doing completely secret. But as I say, if the reports that are coming through are correct, that large numbers of soldiers, I mean, 90%, in defecting and refusing to fight is an enormous figure. And if that figure is correct, then the regime's got very little time left.
what about this joint policing? of this terribly narrow straits that's stopping all the oil tankers coming out. Um, I can't see that happening. Is this one of Trump's imagined ideas? When Iran says one thing and Trump says another, generally speaking, because of the theocracy there in Iran, that it's a lie. You don't believe a word they say. Whereas
Yes.
Trump, we don't know. The jury's still out. Is he trying it on?
Well, in war, it is, it's a fact in war. You can't just tell your opponent exactly what you're doing. So Trump, I think Trump is very honest. But I mean, when a war is underway, he can't come on to the media and say, "Oh, this is what we're doing, and this is what Iran is doing," and just give them all the facts. Because if you do that, you're just informing your enemy what your plans are. So inevitably in war, there's going to be a certain amount of deception. But what seems clear to me is that by closing the Straits of Hormuz, Iran is actually harming itself. And apparently, there's virtually no trade going on at the moment from Iranian ports. So they're not actually exporting any goods, they're not exporting any oil. And their economy seems to be at a complete standstill. Actually trading in Iran is very, very difficult. Now, they may well be able to stop exports from Qatar and stop exports from Bahrain and Kuwait and other countries that are that are affected by the Strait of Hormuz. But they're actually hurting themselves more than they're hurting these countries. So, I don't think, frankly, that closing the Strait of Hormuz is something that can carry on indefinitely. And obviously, Trump wants to do what he can to keep the oil flowing because from the other countries in the Gulf, simply because he doesn't want the international oil price to go up too much. Although, having said that, the fact that America is self-sufficient in oil, they don't actually need themselves to buy on the foreign market, means that America will benefit from the oil price going up. It's not actually a disaster for the American economy at all.
The other thing we've got to mention, Sid, of course, is the midterm elections. He's got one eye, Mr. Trump, on that. That's going to influence some of his decisions, I would think.
Yes, but it's also why the hard left media in America is trying to paint the whole war as a disaster. And Trump should never have invaded Iran in the first place. It's not working out as he expected. It's he said that he was trying to overthrow the regime, but it's not working. We don't actually know what his aims are. These are all the messages of the hard left media. But I don't think it's true. I don't think any of it's true. And if, as I say, what's really going on is that large number of army units are defecting and the people are rising up, even though the regime in their death throes are doing their level best just to kill anyone that opposes them. They can't carry on doing it for much longer with the economy completely stagnant. And probably within a month or so, all the objectives will be achieved and the war will be over. If that happens, then it will actually be a big boost to Trump in the midterms.
Another mystery, Sid, in all this is that crude, even manufactured oil coming out of Iran is 20% of the consumption of the world. So 80% is not affected. And people are saying, well, come on, can we turn the tap up for the 80%? There's plenty of spare there. All we hear is doom and gloom. We're all going to die, usual thing coming out of the press. Whereas if you look at it logically, okay, it's going to go up, but it's not a disaster. We can work through this one.
Well, it's not 20% coming from Iran, it's 20% coming through the Straits of Hormuz. So that includes all the oil coming from Kuwait and Iraq and Qatar and Oman and Bahrain, which are all in the Gulf.
That's
So
perfectly true, but don't forget, let's put another thing here, and that a lot of that 20% is going to the enemy, inverted commas,
yeah,
China.
oh yes.
So it's not affecting the West. We're overreacting against it.
Yeah, no, it is true, but I mean you see it's the market price that's the problem. And the market price has gone up considerably. I mean it's been going just above or just below $100 a barrel, and it was about $70 a barrel. Now, Trump, being a businessman, is actually doing his best to keep the price stable. So he's actually gone to Russia and so said to Russia, while this war is going on in Iran, we're going to waive sanctions. We're going to allow you to bring more oil onto the market, which of course Ukraine doesn't like. And I guess Putin is like, oh, thanks a lot. And he's also suddenly announced that we're going to allow Iran to export some oil. We're easing sanctions on Iran as well. You know, if they allow normal trade to the Straits of Hormuz. So Trump is doing his level best to keep the price stable because he knows a stable price, even though, as I say, America being self-sufficient in oil can actually benefit from the oil price rise. Still, he knows for business generally, they need stability and they need a stable price.
In all this, one has to look at the hypocrisy of the Labour Party. They've decided, oh, these big oil companies are making a fortune, which is true, and they do need bringing to heel. But the real problem is, Sid, net zero. And how can you, on one hand, say, oh, it's the big companies, and on the other hand, the biggest part of the pie is taxation at the pump prices. They should be reducing that commensurately with everything else that's happening at the moment. What a hypocrisy!
Yes, but it's not just the price at the pumps, it's also the windfall tax. Now, you see, the Conservatives imposed a windfall tax on the oil companies, which was 75%, which is an enormous figure. But the Conservatives allowed them to offset the windfall tax against investment. So if an oil company like BP or Shell, for instance, was willing to invest money in the North Sea, then that will be offset against the windfall tax, and they basically wouldn't pay the windfall tax. The Labour Party have increased it from 75 to 78, which is only a very small increase. But I said at the time, you know, oh, we're going to increase the windfall tax. I said, well, what are they going to increase it to? It's already 75%. What are they going to increase it to? Well, they've increased it to 78. But that was just because they had to keep, to keep their promise of increasing the windfall tax. But they've also said that oil companies can only offset 30% of the tax against investment. So instead of being able to offset all the tax against investment, they can only offset 30%. So now there's no incentive whatsoever for any company, any of these large oil companies to invest in the North Sea. So that's the tax, frankly, that's the tax that needs to change. They either need to do away with the windfall tax or reduce it substantially, or they need to allow it to offset the whole tax against investments, which is what happened before. And that's essential, frankly, if we're going to get proper investment in the North Sea. And like you say, the reason they've done this, the reason they've increased the windfall tax and said you can't offset it against investment, is because behind it is this net zero project, which they're trying to stop all oil and gas, and they're trying to promote wind and solar. That's what's behind it, but it's disastrous, frankly, for the economy right now.
Disastrous and madness. Some figures coming out this week show, and these are minimum, you can double this. The net zero cost is 125 billion,
Hmm.
and that's from the Labour
Yeah.
side think tank. So you can double it, I repeat. Now, it
Hmm.
seems to me, and many other people said, that we have got a party here of ideologues. everybody knows that, we're responsible for 1% of the CO2, which is, in my humble opinion, a myth anyway. That's nothing. We're achieving absolutely nothing. And it's all right saying we're all going to be dead by 2050 or whatever date is chosen. We'll all be dead within 5 years unless we start fracking, drilling, and everything else. The whole thing is a nonsense built by ideologues that have no intention of changing course. And it's all right having a go at Ed Miliband, who is leading the pack, but actually he's not. It's back to Starmer. Starmer can say to Miliband, we've got to change course. If Tony Blair is telling him that, if the trade union, Unite, the biggest contributor to the Labour Party, has half their donation, wow, things are happening.
Yes, you see, there's two things that we need to address, frankly. One is the short term and one is the long term. You see, in the long term, we need to have energy independence in the UK, and we need to put something in place now in order to get to energy independence. Now, if we build nuclear power stations, it may take around 10 years before they come on tap. But we can't just say, oh, it's 10 years. 10 years is too long to even think about. We're going to have at least two general elections before 10 years comes up. So there's no point in putting something in place now that won't be on tap for 10 years. We won't even bother with it. That's the way this government is thinking. And they're even thinking as well, oh, what's the point of bothering about investment in the North Sea? Because it'll take probably at least 3 years before any wells that we invest in now will actually be on tap. So 3 years' time will be too late for us to get the benefit, so it's not worth bothering. So their attitude in the long term is frankly abysmal, and they're not thinking long term properly.
No.
Their attitude is just all wrong. But the other thing is short term. And you see, when we had the last energy crisis, which was when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the oil price shot up and gas prices shot up. And the Conservatives put in place an energy price guarantee to limit the rises. And the Labour Party at the time said, oh, the energy price guarantee is not enough. We should have oil prices frozen. Well, that was unrealistic, frankly. I mean, it's just going to be far too expensive. What the Conservatives did was good because they said, we're going to limit the prices and the government's going to pay. So we're not going to expect the oil companies to pay. The government will pay whatever the difference in price is between our limit and the market price. Unfortunately, they didn't have to pay it for very long, but it was a very powerful, effective guarantee. Now, we're in a similar situation now with the oil price suddenly surging. And what is this government doing? Well, so far, the only thing they've announced is some paltry sum of 53 million to help people that have oil-fired heating. Well, that's very few people in the country that have oil-fired heating. I mean, that's been got rid of a long time ago. So, okay, there's going to be some very limited support with people with oil-fired heating. But at the moment, there's nothing at all in place for people with gas-fired boilers, which is what most people have got in the country. And it's that price which look as though it's going to go up enormously. Now they're going to say, well, we may put something in place for the poorest people. Well, that's not what the Conservatives did. The Conservatives did did an energy price guarantee for everyone, which the Labour Party at the time said wasn't good enough. So, but actually today, we're also hearing that the Labour Party is planning to put 2 billion into what they're calling deprived areas, but of course is with their seats to help the economy in those areas. So they're not focused on the problem, the real problem for the economy right now, which is energy prices. They're not focused on it at all. They're just focusing on what they need to do in order to win votes in the local elections. I mean, frankly, this government's behaviour is just appalling. They don't know what they're doing.
A lot of people agree with you, Sid. If we look finally at the states, you've mentioned the oil, and less people are using oil for central heating. But it has become a problem because where they fill the tank up for £500, it's gone up to 1,000. So maybe there's some egalitarianism working through that. But I repeat, when we've got a situation where they're looking at their own, and let's be honest, most politicians, Sid, or whichever hue they may be, are only interested in preserving their seat for the next one. Regrettably, the political world has changed. I've interviewed many politicians in the last 30 years. I've noticed a sea change between the goodies and the baddies. There are goodies there, such as yourself, of course. But in all parties, you've got people thinking, as we say in Spain, of the pueblo, of their local area, their local town. But a lot are thinking only of the pasta, the actual money in the hand, and they'll do anything, whichever party, whichever country, to maintain the power. Maybe there's time to rethink how you become a member of parliament. Now, on the other extreme, you're paid practically nothing. In the good old days, perhaps we're paying them too much these days.
Well, yes. I mean, frankly, I admire Donald Trump. I'm sorry to come back to Donald Trump, but you see, the fact is, Donald Trump is pursuing policies which he believes are in the best interests of the nation. And he doesn't care whether people like them or approve of them or not. I mean, a good example is the tariffs. See, all the economists say, oh, if you impose tariffs, it'll cause tremendous harm to your economy as well as harm to other economies. And we've got to get rid of tariffs altogether if we can for the sake of the world economy. Well, he's imposed tariffs simply because America's had a massive trade imbalance with a lot of other countries in the world. I mean, most notably China, Canada, Mexico, the countries around them, as well as the European Union. Massive trade imbalance. So by imposing tariffs, he's beginning to correct the trade imbalance. But surprisingly, as far as the economists are concerned, as well as at the same time as imposing tariffs, he's got over 2% growth in the US economy, while the EU economies are generally around 1%. And the Chinese economy even is gone down enormously in the growth that they're experiencing. So his economy is actually doing very well while imposing these tariffs. So he's doing it not for pragmatics, he's doing it on principle. And he's also showing, by the way, that when the UK left the European Union, the best way for us to have left the European Union would have been just to have left with no deal and imposed tariffs on the European Union, because we've got a massive trade deficit with the European Union. We've had historically no trade agreement at all with the United States. So we've traded perfectly effectively with the United States, and we've been largely in balance with them with no agreement. With an agreement with the European Union, we've had a massive deficit. So we've shown that having tariffs is actually to the benefit of the country that imposes them if you've got a big trade deficit. So the agreement we've done with the European Union is actually very harmful to the UK economy, and Starmer's made it even worse since he's come into power. So what politicians should do is the right thing. But far too many politicians do what is, how can I put it? You say feather their own nest. That's a part of it. But part of it is also their political dogma. And net zero is political dogma, which is actually harming the economy, harming the country. And Starmer is doing far too much of just pursuing political dogma. Bringing us close to the EU is not about feathering his own nest. Bringing us close to the EU is all about his political dogma. But it's disastrous.
A lot of people agreeing with you, Sid. Let's look at another party, the Reform Party. Nigel Farage said on Tuesday that his party would introduce a 5p cut to energy levies, funded through £12 billion of reductions to green spending. Is that far enough?
Well, I think we should get rid of all the green levies altogether. I mean, it's not working, frankly. And the Conservatives have also said they're going to get rid of these green levies. So yeah, absolutely, get rid of them. But it's not going to save billions of pounds, but it's moving in the right direction.
You're talking old Farage or original Farage there. Is he slipping the nearer he gets to power?
Well, I think he's becoming more pragmatic because he's beginning to think, you know, if I'm in power, then can I actually do this? And it's right that he's asking those questions, frankly. But some of the things that he's saying shows he's not really thought through his policies in the first place. I mean, to give an example, I mean, in the Reform Manifesto in the last election said that they were going to increase the tax threshold to 20,000. They're going to reduce the basic rate of tax from 20 to 18. They're going to reduce VAT and substantially, they said, and so on and so forth. And then suddenly Nigel Farage announces, I don't think we're going to be able to afford to reduce tax. So he's basically saying, I don't think we can implement our manifesto. Now, that shows he's not really thought through the policies that they put forward in the manifesto in the first place. And I've said many times, there's drastic increase in quangos that, which we can reduce. We can save billions there. We can save billions by getting rid of the social requirement of government contracts. We can create a lot of money by introducing a turnover tax and offsetting it against corporation tax to help British business. We can get rid of woke schemes across the board in the civil service, and that can save about 20 billion. There's loads of ways which we can save money, and we can use that money to cut taxes. So Nigel Farage is wrong. He can cut taxes if he does the right things.
Let's turn our eye on Kemi Badenoch. She has now condemned net zero policies as being bankrupting for the country. Yep, got that one right. She's pledged to scrap climate legislation that mandates emission targets. Now, in all this, actually, is there consensus between the Tories and Reform? Are they slowly getting nearer to each other, mainly out of fear that the left wing will attract so many ultra left wingers, a la Green and other fringe parties, that it's going to need a coalition to get them out of the way?
Well, there's two things. There's one is what's going to happen before the election, and the other is what's going to happen after the election. See, in my view, before the election, what they should do is just focus on what seats they should target, and there should be an agreement between Reform and the Conservatives as what seats they're going to target. So basically, Reform can say to the Conservatives, okay, those are your seats. We're not going to bother about campaigning in those seats, and these are our target seats, and we want you to give us a free rein in these target seats, which we're aiming to win. And they need that sort of agreement. That's the agreement in the last general election, which Labour and the Lib Dems had. And that's why the Lib Dems have ended up with 70 odd seats. It's not because, the Lib Dems became wildly popular. It was because they had this tacit agreement with the Labour Party that these seats that the Labour Party wouldn't campaign in, and they didn't campaign in in the seats which all these seats which the Lib Dem won. They won them because the Labour Party weren't campaigning in those seats. That's the sort of agreement, but it wasn't a coalition agreement before the election. That we're not going to stand a candidate. They still stood candidates. They just didn't campaign. And that's what Conservatives and Reform need to do, and they need to do it urgently. After the election, if it is a hung parliament and Conservatives and Reform have enough MPs to form a government, then absolutely they'll have to get together and agree a coalition.
Yeah, we're in bizarre times, Sid. If you look at the leader of the Liberals and look at the leader of the Greens, look at the potential leader the lovely Angela of the Labour Party. I can't see any one of them being able to meet with other prime ministers of other countries. So I can't see any of them with any gravitas that can lead the country in any way.
Yes, I think you're right, and it's interesting that you've lumped them all together because Ed Davey, as leader of the Liberal Democrats, has actually said, if there's a hung parliament, I'm going to support Labour. I'm not going to support the Conservatives in the future. So by saying that now, he's aligning himself with the Labour Party and he's basically saying, I'm going to keep Labour in power if I have a chance to. And the Greens, of course, there's no way the Greens, which are now very much on the left of the Labour Party, there's no way that they're going to support a Conservative reform government. So really, people's choice is Conservative reform or Labour, Lib Dem, Green. That's the choice. Now, you say in terms of leadership, I mean, Keir Starmer has proven to be a disastrous leader, frankly. And, he's a lawyer, no charisma, and dishonest, frankly. He's said things and done completely the opposite. I don't think he's going to be leading the Labour Party into the next election. But is there somebody else who could take over? Well, Angela Rayner would be even worse in most people's opinion. I mean, I can't see anybody else there, frankly, who is ready to step in and take power. So there is a power vacuum. Certainly, the leader of the Greens would be totally disastrous. Ed Davey himself would be completely disastrous. So, there's nobody on the left, frankly, who is an inspirational leader ready to take power. I think Kemi Badenoch could do a good job, and I think Nigel Farage could do a good job. So I think on the right you have got people that could lead the country and equipped to lead the country.
Let's not go away too far from the Tory party at the moment because they have still got the wets that have destroyed the Tory party to its present state of demise. Let's be honest, Sid, we've not had a Tory party since Thatcher. And if you look at the number of wets that remain, that basically are Liberal Democrats, there's a real problem for Kemi.
Well, maybe, but at the moment she's setting the tone and very much taking the party. Well, she's definitely taking the party to the right. I mean, there's no question about that. And she's proving herself very effective in Prime Minister's Question Time. And, people said of Margaret Thatcher when she took over from Ted Heath, she took over a party that was very much split down the middle. In fact, there was Ted Heath, of course, stayed in Parliament, stayed as her chief opposition for an awfully long time. And when she first became leader, she had a shadow cabinet that was full of Ted Heath supporters. Fortunately, Willie Whitelaw, who was a Ted Heath supporter, was willing to become a deputy prime minister and support her. And he was absolutely essential to the Margaret Thatcher project. But at the end of the day, when she came into power, even though she had problems with her cabinet in the early years, she was still, because she had so much conviction as to and such a clear direction on what she was doing, and she was able thereby to maintain a degree of popularity. I'm afraid all the wets faded away. They called them wets at the time, but they all faded away. And I think Kemi Badenoch can do the same, frankly. If she has clear conviction, this is the way I'm taking the party, which she's beginning to establish that conviction. This is the way I'm taking the party. This is where we're going. This is the way we've got to go in order to solve the problems of the country. And there is no alternative. If she establishes that conviction, then all her detractors will fade away.
Yes, time will tell, as we keep saying, and it will. Let's stay with Keir Starmer at the moment and think of Mandy Mandelson. There's a lot of nasties coming out about this, but one thing is absolutely stonewall certain. He's made bad decisions about Mandelson for a long time. And of course, nothing can be said worse than that Mr. Mandelson wanted £500,000 to go to finish his contract. That is appalling, Sid. He finished up with 75,000 as a deal, but he was going to go to an industrial tribunal. Come back to bite the Labour Party now, hasn't it? Because he could well have got a lot more doing that.
There's no question whatsoever that Peter Mandelson should never have been appointed as our ambassador to the United States. The fact that he was appears to have been based on personal friendship with Keir Starmer, and Keir Starmer seemed determined to, and also personal friendship with McSweeney, who was Keir Starmer's advisor, but friendship with those two. And Keir Starmer seems to have decided that he was going to appoint him come what may. And he just totally rode roughshod over the whole vetting process. Now, he knew full well that there was a problem with Peter Mandelson because he'd already resigned twice because of dishonesty, and he was called Prince of Darkness. I mean, he had a character problems, character flaws. The relationship with Epstein was something which is, in addition to all those problems, frankly, was another problem. Now, what really annoys me intensely is that the position now of Keir Starmer is that Mandelson deceived me, he lied to me, and he deceived me. If I knew then what I know now, there's no way I would have appointed him. That's what he said. But then, under scrutiny, he's asked, okay, what questions did you ask of Peter Mandelson then that he lied to you about? And he refuses to answer. And it appears that he never actually asked Mandelson any questions. So when he said he lied to me, if he didn't ask him any questions, he didn't tell him any lies, did he? So it now seems as though the liar, unfortunately, is Keir Starmer. And the fact that we're now in a situation where we've not only had an appalling appointment, we've also got a prime minister that lied about what he did in appointing him. Frankly, means we now have a prime minister that has to resign and can no longer continue in office. And hopefully he will resign very soon.
Yes, better the devil you know.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm sorry, but he's gone too far. I mean, okay, I mean, Angela Rayner may be worse, but it's up to the Labour Party to come up with somebody that isn't worse, frankly.
Okay, okay, Sid, we move on. And well, there are a number of things that are crossovers here. We previously mentioned this wretched situation that Ed and his friend Keir do not want us to drill. But the offshore oil field, which is west of the Shetland Isles, is really coming into its own. It's the Rosebank oil field. And there's another one actually a bit further out. And it's the biggest beast yet. And this could solve our problems and can come online before the end of this year.
Really?
And so it's indescribable, these people carrying on with net zero, when the rest of the world has at least started, oh, perhaps we got this wrong. Others have completely turned their back on it, like Trump. It's drill, baby, drill. If we want saving as a nation economically, then we've got to learn lessons. But there's no sign of that, Sid.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, we've already been over that. I mean, and the problem is the windfall tax, which isn't being talked about. But if you have a 78% tax and you can't offset it against investment, then frankly, I mean, there's no way that the oil companies can do what they need to do in the North Sea. And that's what the government need to get to grips with, and they need to get to grips with it very, very quickly.
Right, we go on to a number of things that again we've mentioned, but we need to investigate a little bit further. Are we getting the truth from various government departments, etc., etc.? And one of them is the universities, who have been set up by Tony Blair to educate half the nation plus. And it's been a disaster for many, many reasons, as we're now appreciating. But one of them is it's a hotbed for the lefties. But there are signs that universities now are going to come under greater scrutiny. They've gone too far left. There's anti-Semitism there in spades, and we know at the moment the problems with the ambulances in London. But I am constrained here because I have got many Jewish friends in the Manchester area, and they've been telling me for years that they cannot lead a normal life. If they go to the shops, especially if they go to their kosher shop, you should see them. They've got to pass through two doors with careful locks on them that they know the codes for to even get inside the shop, Sid. They go to synagogue and there's guards on the door. They go to the Jewish schools, there's guards on the door. They are not leading a normal life and nobody's done anything about it.
Yes, and you see, it is a major, major concern. And of course, we've had in the UK just this last week, these four ambulances in Golders Green that have been burned as an anti-Semitic attack, and I actually believe it may even be connected to Iran. But it's just horrendous the fact that people think it's somehow acceptable to destroy ambulances because they're owned by Jewish people. And but it's just like what? But we've always had a situation really with our universities for many years where they're a hotbed for idealism. Part of the problem, frankly, is that the New Age theory is that you've got to start with the youth. And if you can change the minds of the youth, that's how over time you'll change society. And they're very, very much committed to that ideal, which is why a lot of people on the left focus on universities to change the minds of the young people, but which it has a degree of success, I suppose, but not totally, because we've also got a revival going on among Generation Z. So the churches also need to be focusing on universities because, it is, and I must say, there is a big difference between debating in a university and debating, for instance, in a parliament. Because, I haven't been in parliament, but I've been in a council chamber. And you debate in a council chamber, and you've got your Labour Party on one side, and Conservatives on the other side, and whoever else is in the middle. And you can debate to your heart's content, but you're not going to change people's minds. You can be involved in a university debate, which I did as a student. I was involved in a lot of debates, and I did them just as a Christian. And if you can debate effectively, you can change people's minds and you can win them over. And that's why the universities are such an important area to go and debate and to go and engage in. And absolutely, we've got to take note of what's going on. And as Christians, we need to be there engaging.
Sid, the Bank of England was summoned again yesterday to an important meeting at number 10. They're discussing the oil crisis, obviously, and how we're going to get out of it. And there's talk now not of 2 bank interest raises in the next 12 months, but 4. Now, a lot of political commentators saying that would be an absolute disaster. It would squash already our name abroad. Believe it or not, Sid, foreign creditors now regard Britain as a grievance nation, is their term. And we are paying the price of lack of grit. We don't get the act together. Apart from all the problems, it's a question of, do they know what they're doing?
Well, this government doesn't know what it's doing, but you see, because they've come in and spent wildly. And and people don't understand most because you don't hear this on the media, unfortunately. But the truth is that they've spent something like 200 billion more per year, most of which has gone on Quangos, some of which has gone on the National Health Service. They've spent an extra 31 billion on the National Health Service. But because they've had this massive spending spree, when they come into power, they're now in a situation where we've got a world crisis because of the oil price suddenly going up because of the war in Iran, which is also causing interest rates to go up. So that means a massive increase in the cost of the government debt, which is already very high, which is going to go up significantly. This is what's going to cause major economic problems for Rachel Reeves. Now, if they'd actually governed prudently when they came into power, which frankly the last Labour government did with Gordon Brown, and when they came into power in 1997, they agreed to follow conservative economic policies for the first 2 years. And they came into power in 1997 and governed very prudently, economically. But this government hasn't. They've governed absolutely recklessly. And the result of that is now when we've got a crisis, we're completely unprepared for it. So if they govern prudently, we would have now been said, okay, we're going to have to allow our borrowing to increase a little bit in order to offset because of this crisis that we're now facing, and we're going to put in place an energy price guarantee, and we're going to we're going to have to increase borrowing a little bit to fund the energy price guarantee, but this will bring stability to the economy. And that would then have kept interest rates down. But because they've governed so recklessly, we've got no room to maneuver at all. And frankly, the economy is now going to be in a complete mess.
Yeah, everything is flatlining in the economy at the moment, except unemployment, that's at 5.2%. And of course, that again down to Labour and the way they crushed many small businesses. They are not a nice bunny, Sid. We quickly move on, time's gone, to our sports section. And it's interesting, isn't it, that we got so many teams into the quarter and semi-finals of the competition in Europe, and we were saying, oh, look at the standard of our game, but let's move on a week from that statement. And they're all failing, but they're failing big. 5-1, 6-2. I mean, the scores put us in our place. So what are the Europeans doing? Because they are obviously better than our Premiership teams.
Well, what seems to be the case, frankly, is it seems to vary from the time of year because, we seem to be better in the autumn. And yes, in the autumn, we've in the league phase of the Champions League, the Premiership clubs performed incredibly well, with 5 getting into the top 8, which was like amazing. But then you've got Paris Saint-Germain and Real Madrid, who didn't get into the top 8, but it didn't seem to matter. They didn't seem to do very well in the autumn. But then come the spring, and they're absolutely on fire and roaring. And this is what Paris Saint-Germain, and it happened exactly the same last year. Last year, they didn't do well in the league phase in the autumn, but then come the spring, and Paris Saint-Germain end up winning the competition. And Real Madrid did incredibly well Barcelona did, very well. And this is where we don't seem to be focused enough on the spring. And as these big other Spanish and French teams seem to be, and German teams, I guess, as well, with Bayern Munich, they seem to be a lot more focused on the spring. This is the time when we really go for it. This is the time when you win. You don't win anything in the autumn. You win it in the spring.
Are we playing too many matches, too many internal competitions?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether we're playing a lot fewer than the others. I think where we have missed out is not having a winter break, which some of the continental teams have. They have a little bit of time off, which seems to get them refocused and then really go for it in the spring. I think that's where we're missing out, and maybe we do need to seriously look at having some time off in the winter.
Curveball here for you, Sid. Your sport, women's football, how about that? And it's been decided that they're going to ban the men coaching and managing because there's too many of them. It's got to be all women. Good idea, or is it tokenism?
Well, honestly I don't know an answer to that question. We don't have I don't see any reason whatsoever why women shouldn't manage a men's team if they want to, but I'm afraid the reality is that um, football is more attractive to boys than it is to girls. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, people might not like me saying that, but it's true. And it's interesting, there is nobody at all in the professional ranks of male football who is a homosexual. Yet in the women's game, you've got numerous people that are lesbians. And it's like, because football is attractive to the male side, even of women. So, but it's not attractive to the female side of men. I mean, that is the truth. And it's truth that may be unattractive to some people, but we've got to face the reality. And there's nothing wrong whatsoever, frankly, in having male coaches within the women's team in the women's game.
Well, we're going to bring this to a halt before it gets in trouble, more trouble. Sid, fascinating as usual. See you next week.